What's up, guys? Hope everyone is doing well. In this video, I'm going to be going over some updates for Bitcoin, but nonetheless, to go ahead and get it started here. First off, on the 4-hour chart, I had been monitoring this uptrend here, support. Recently, Bitcoin has broke below it, could quickly bounce back above. Maybe we'll actually see Bitcoin make some actual movement towards the upside rather than this just, deathly boring price action that we've seen here for Bitcoin. Mainly being rejected here off the 200 EMA, going all the way back to the beginning of February. I mean, here there's a wick up to it rejection recently on February 14th. Could also be potentially seeing one more retest here of this yellow descending, what was resistance here, going all the way back to December 17th. So far, that's been support outside of this deviation here, going all the way back to January 17th. There is also this lower green descending support here with respect to the wicks. Could see Bitcoin come down here, meet again the yellow here, also this green, also the purple box here as well, or the zone, which has been the general support going all the way back to once Bitcoin had this move up here towards around 90K and started to fizzle out volume-wise, and it's kind of gradually started stair-stepping, and ever since then, essentially, it's just been going sideways. Really being the base of this move upwards here that we saw for Bitcoin, going all the way back to here, 50,000, moving all the way up, and really ever since hitting 90,000, moving up to 108,000, it's just been going sideways between or within the range of a 90 to around $108,000, $109,000. So definitely could see the price retest that once more before finally moving towards the upside. Also, there is the 800 EMA here, which has yet to have been retested on the 4-hour. Totally see something along those lines. At this point, it sits at around 90.6 thousand. There's also this small vector zone here as well that could be completely cleared up going towards the downside. In general, to me, Bitcoin just doesn't really look that strong, although, I mean, the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index sits at around 47, and even though it doesn't look too strong, it does look rather weak, and the morale in general is also just not that good. I mean, even with outside of Bitcoin, within looking at altcoins and the whole notion of altcoin season being dead, it's not coming, which is, I mean, cycle to cycle, people have been saying that it was going around towards the end of 2020, around December, right as altcoin season was really starting to ramp up then. But despite the weakness that Bitcoin appears to be showing here in the charts and the low morale, the negative morale, that is typically what is the case when Bitcoin is setting its lows. And even though Bitcoin, for example, here just doesn't, like where it is currently, I mean, zooming in, but, had this move up, did break below here, this green support, was starting to move back up, and then ultimately just got rejected right back down. I mean, it just keeps getting rejected at key areas. I mean, as I said, the 200 EMA here, the 50 EMA here as well is just continuing to act as resistance. So, I mean, if we go all the way back to, so this movement here from early January leading into mid-January, where we saw this double bottom type formation play out, and, Bitcoin had quite a volatile and violent move here to the downside. Total is around 7% in just a few candles. Pretty quick move, and then immediately V-shaped recovery moved from around 89,000 all the way up to 109,000. So I mean, over the next 24 hours, sometime within this next week, we could see Bitcoin again. Right now, it looks weak. Morale's not that good, but all of a sudden, we could totally see it finally start to move up here towards the upside. It really needs to get above this 200 EMA, which sits at right now 98.5. Really, 100,000 is what is important. Not only does that find important, so then this price action here, sideways movement for Bitcoin over the last 3 months or so, psychologically, I mean, that's just going to be very important. Getting above really kind of where the top portion of this orange range is right here would also correlate with getting above this black zone here as well, specifically this upper descending resistance here that goes all the way back to roughly mid-January at around $109.3 thousand. If we look down here at the indicators, the US RSI isn't sits at 40. It's, I mean, typically anything 30 below is considered the genuinely oversold territory. That's only happens, going all the way back here in February 3rd, all the way back here in December 20th. So, I mean, the RSI has definitely got some more room to go to the downside. Just really as the price does. I mean, a similar situation for the RVI down here. It's sitting at around, at lowest recently, going down to 31. I mean, that's comparable to, I mean, it's lower than when, or rather, it's not as low, but it's getting very close to being as low as when Bitcoin was back here early January, first to second week of January here, when it was sitting somewhere around 93.5, 94,000 right here in this range. Obviously, the price is coming down close to that, so we could maybe see something similar. We'll see these indicators roughly in the same areas, basically in the same areas, and continue to then see a bounce here, which, best case scenario would be that final bounce, which, if we look down here at the ASO as well, this is also, so we see here this horizontal line sitting at around 26.5. It is almost the lowest it has been throughout this entire sideways action. So this is showing that the bullish sentiment is getting quite oversold. It's, again, the morale is just quite low. It's not too far away from being more oversold than here, February 2nd roughly, and also around like January 9th, which both of these would line up with this portion here on the price, and also this portion here, as well as the price is getting very close to being at those same levels. Also, again, this could all be pointing to the fact that we're going to, since, we had Bitcoin back here, having these moments here, interacting with 800 EMA, then finally finding supports along the EMA, that 800 EMA moving up here, now going sideways. Maybe we'll see it meet this 800 EMA again, somewhere around 90,000. Maybe even see some wicks down to like 88, 89,000, and then recover, and then finally begin the final and big move. If you look here at the daily chart, you can see that this ascending zone here that I have been pointing out, finally we're seeing Bitcoin move into it with the current candle and the one prior to it. There's also, again, this ascending zone here that's acted as support since Bitcoin started to fizzle out back in around November, leading into the last 3 months or so of price action. This has been very boring, definitely boring, going sideways. So again, could totally see the price come down here to the bottom of this, seeing somewhere basically around 92,000. Also notable to point out, the 200 EMA here is at around 85,000. So I mean, that's definitely, maybe we'll see one final shakeout, quick move towards the downside, then it'll relatively quickly start to recover towards the upside. Maybe what is happening here is leading into the end of this month, February, we're going to see this move down, maybe to as low as here, the 200 EMA, or maybe, obviously maybe it'll just come down somewhere around here, and then leading into like the right at the end of February, beginning of March is when we'll start to see Bitcoin actually recover. If you look here at the RSI, it's still on this downtrend, still continuing to go lower, as you can see here. Really needs to solidify, breaking this descending resistance. Stock RSI again also is pretty tapped out towards the bottom. The MACD was showing some promise here. It's still in this decision-making zone. It's still white, but it's looking as if it wants to turn back into bearish sentiment or back into the pink. The histogram had been cooling off a little bit, but now it's starting to pick back up in the bearish sentiment. If you look here at the RSI, it is angled towards the upside, whereas the price here is angled towards the downside. So that potentially, although this is the only one that potentially showing a bullish divergence, so I mean, I would take that with a grain of salt. There's also, if you look here, right now this is still an ascending for the price action, going all the way back to January 10th to currently. And if you look here at the RSI, it is ever so slightly descending. So also another, hidden bullish divergence is also here as well. If you look at these 2 points, I mean, even here as well on the MACD, it's on the RSI as well. It's pretty much on all of these. And here, if you look at the histogram, it's there as well for the stock RSI. So, I mean, again, really definitely still room, by all means, for it to come down lower. If worst case scenario at this point, I don't think that it's going to go below this vector zone, which would be around a 30% move down to maybe around like 77.2. If anything, I would probably, if it ends up coming to that scenario, likely it's going to maybe come down to around this 200 EMA. Maybe we'll see some drastic wicks down towards the lower portion of this vector zone. But right now, I still don't particularly think that is, obviously it's not definitive, and I just think it's quite likely at this point, just given how weak Bitcoin looks. But as I was saying earlier, the fear and greed's reaching those low levels. I mean, if you're going all the way back to, let me here, look at the fear and greed right now being at 47, that's comparable to this zone right here from around June to September of 2024, where Bitcoin was heading towards that $60,000 to $50,000 region. Now, obviously, Bitcoin traded sideways here for roughly 2 to 3 months. I don't think that that's, again, obviously I could be wrong. I have no idea what's going to happen, but I don't think that's what Bitcoin is doing right here, because as I've shown, I mean, it's also comparable to 33 right here back in March of 2023 is the lowest it's gotten during, if you look here, this is intermediate consolidation of this move here. Here was also an intermediate consolidation of this move, and I believe that with this move here currently, this is the intermediate consolidation. So each of these times it got down to 50 at lowest here, and then like I said here, 33 was the lowest, but it generally was staying at around 50. So we could be seeing the fear and greed being tapped out in terms of the fear. And then also, as I said, the few times also in the past where it was below 50 would be when Bitcoin, for example, here was around 27 to 25,000, and also here from around 50 to 60,000. So there is some, in terms of psychological sentiment, showing some signs of potentially, still definitely some room more into the downside, but definitely could for all intents and purposes, because of the fact that it just generally looks weak and the morale is kind of bad to see that move. Because when Bitcoin is typically looking at its weakest and morale is lowest, it's a lot of times when it actually starts to reverse towards the upside. Now looking here at this weekly chart, as I was pointing out recently, as you can see here, this bull flag of a pennant variety. Zooming in, we can see that as of right now, the current weekly candle is just a smidge below. Currently 5 days, 16 hours left. Right now, you can see here the 13 EMA is still being respected. One of the big things I pointed out recently with respect to this pattern, again, if you look here at the prior intermediate consolidation, we saw that the 15 EMA here was respected. Go back to the first intermediate consolidation of the bull run, we can also see that it was the 13 EMA rather was being respected. So if this trend's going to follow through here with this intermediate consolidation, maybe we'll have 1 weekly candle, maybe that's this weekly candle close below it, and then afterwards we'll see that move up. Now oftentimes these type of patterns here will get fake out, so we might see something along these lines. Maybe it'll bounce here at this ascending trend line, so maybe we'll see some fake out here, maybe for about a week and a half or so, where this current candle will close below. The next one will open up, maybe it'll close below, and then the candle of the weekly candle beginning of the March here will then end up reversing here towards the upside, and we'll see a breakout of this bull flag pennant somewhere like maybe closer to mid-March if the fake out does indeed happen. Best case scenario, that over the next 5 days, we'll see Bitcoin set a local low within this current weekly candle, and then this one will flip green, it'll move back up, and then we'll see a breakout probably closer towards end of February, first week of March, rather than pushing mid-March or so. Now, we look here at mainly I just want to point out the RVI, just to show how oversold it is. It's more oversold than when Bitcoin was here at 50, ranging from around $55,000 to $50,000. So that's important to note. It's almost getting close to being as oversold, specifically back when Bitcoin was first hitting around 54 to 53,000. Currently it sits at around 30, so generally that's going to be, this is not an RSI, but generally anything 30 below is typically considered that generally oversold territory. I mean, it's also more getting close to being as oversold when Bitcoin was back September 4th of 2023, when it was at $25.4 thousand. Yet Bitcoin is all the way up at $95,000. So I mean, we're talking about a $70,000 price difference towards the upside. Yet the RSI or the RVI is as oversold it is. As I mentioned, each and every single, if you look here at these intermediate consolidations, there's been these hidden bullish divergences here, as I pointed out more in depth in a post on X a few days ago, going over the intermediate consolidations, the temporal trend here, this bullish, this pennant flag, and a number of these indicators. Now they're also, the ASO here looks as if it wants to cross over. This has not happened in any where we saw this crossover happen like this. This hasn't happened in any of these prior intermediate consolidations here, as you can see on the ASO right here. So if that does happen, I don't necessarily think that spells total disaster. If we look back here, the last time this did happen, this was actually leading right into when Bitcoin was bottoming out at 50K. So it's not always just a massive, bearish disaster if that does happen. And if it does happen, it could, very briefly, have some sort of a crossover along these lines, and then they quickly then, cross back over to where it essentially would amount to nothing. And also, as Bitcoin is maturing in general, since its inception, but more specifically within this overall bull run here, it makes a lot of sense to potentially see this crossover as Bitcoin's getting later on in this bull market, these moves, as you can see here, this first bullish leg to the second bullish leg and even to this upcoming third bullish leg, each of them are getting longer and the percentage gains are getting large as well. So it would make sense to see something like this in terms of this deviation on this ASO if that does end up indeed even having that crossover that I was mentioning. Lastly, I want to point out this ascending channel here, where we have the yellow channel here drawn with respect to the ascending trend line of each of these, again, where you see the first leg here, so characterized here by this impulse wave, this 5-stage impulse wave, where we have leading up here to 1, correction to 2, and then up to 3, correction to 4, then currently moving up to 5. In each of these in between being characterized by these black ABC patterns moving up here towards the upside, where again we are in that intermediate A to B correction or consolidation. And what I find to be very interesting is if you look here at this first B, it corrected all the way down to the midway point to the 0.5, as you can see here, this dashed line, the midway point of this overall ascending channel, like characterizing this bull market and its structure. Whereas if we look here at the second A to B, looking at B, it corrected down to the 618 and then it moved up to 3. And we look here at our current A to B, you can see that it is currently sitting around the top of the 786. So what's interesting is as I pointed out here, this first B was at the 0.5, second B was at the 0.618, and this third B is hitting the 786. So it's kind of just trickling downwards or upwards from 0.5 to 0.618 to 0.786, just transitioning across the most important Fibonacci levels from 0.5 to 0.786. So this could, again, also be a reason to see a bounce here soon over the next 5 days, over the next week, going into early next week, maybe we'll see Bitcoin more or less just kind of continue to, with low volatility, kind of just trickle down here, not really going too much below, like, let's just say 94K. Maybe it'll go sideways leading into later February. Here's right around like the 24th, and then it'll move up here towards the upside, which would relatively, factor into this current candle, maybe closing somewhat red, and the next one opens up and then it immediately moves back above, and generally validating the pattern and not really falling through some form of fake out. Now, the upper portion of this channel sits at around 220 to 225,000. Now, this is also, if you factor in if you do the ratios between each of these moves, and then you apply the same ratio to the second one, that's what takes it out to roughly mid-June, which if it hits this ascending trend line again, which I think is quite likely, not set into stone, but quite likely, then I think, if it does hit this trend line again by sometime around roughly mid-June, then it's going to be anywhere from around $220,000 to $230,000, which is also validated by and this chart doesn't have everything on it that I need. I'll use this index chart here, which if you go, actually I'll just do this here, just use this same one. So if we go all the way back, as I mentioned, that ascending trend line of the current, in a more micro sense, of the current bull market, where we have 220, 230,000, and then we see here, again, I've gone over this so many times, so I mean, those of you that are familiar with this, you're really probably tired of me going over this point and just beating a dead horse, but we go all the way back to phase 1 of cycle 2 here from 2011 June all the way to the end of the super cycle, December 2013. this orange zone generally, specifically on the 2.272 is where it topped out at. Phase 1 ended there. The only thing applies to phase 2, cycle 2 here. Here from 2013 in November to December 2017, we can also see this orange zone was hit. The 2.272 was the fib specific in terms of proximity where that bull market topped out at. So the entirety of cycle 2, both phases were characterized by topping out at in a proximity of the 2.272. If we do here, this being price action we're seeing currently, phase 1 of cycle 3 from 2017 December all the way to sometime, I think at this point, still looking towards later Q2, early Q3, maybe Q4 at latest, but generally 2025. We can see that zooming in, specifically the 272 sits at around 208,000, but generally this orange zone is from around 185,000 all the way up to around 250,000. So once more, that is what validates the, not only do we have the historical Fibonacci retracement pointing to that, it's been met ever since going all the way back to 2011, the ascending trend here of each of these rejection zones of the current bull market also is validating the median of the overall $180,000 to $250,000 range. And there's plenty of other things as well that I've gone over that also point to that general range as well. There's plenty of other credible analysts within the Bitcoin space that are also pointing to just somewhere broadly within 200 to 230,000, where 200 to 250,000 is the more likely to kind of tighten that range up a little bit to be a little bit more precise in terms of where Bitcoin might end up going. Really, but to wrap this up, again, Bitcoin really, best case scenario, needs to, within this next week, over the next 5 days leading into it, at latest early next week, let's say this candle closes looking like it does, then this next candle, best case scenario, needs to start to move back up and then continue to break out. Also holding, again, this 13 EMA is going to be very important for confirming and affirming the overall trend with respect to it. And then also, again, just for the temporal pattern as well. I mean, we go all the way back here, Q1 2023, here Q2 of 2024, now it's, or Q1 rather, so it's Q1 each of these single times. Now again, we're Q1 of 2025, from 2023 to 2024 to 2025. Q1 has always lined up so far with these intermediate retracements or consolidations. So if history is going to rhyme, then we will see this bounce moving up here towards, somewhere around maybe 180K at lowest, maybe even $250,000 to $300,000 at highest. But that was all that I wanted to go over in this video. So as always, none of this is meant to be financial advice, but all that being said and everything gone over, I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. I'm regretting now, won't I see you forever, such a long